Ready, go.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I think you're our sixth person
Well,
today, and it's just
pleasure.
such a joy. So, what we're going to be ending up with all these elder memories. Paul will put it together, and we'll all get together and have a ball watching ourselves say what we have to say. So, for starters, first tell me your name and where you live.
My name is Roberta Floden, and I live in Forest Knolls.
Okay. And so the big question is, how did you discover the valley? What brought you to the San Geronimo Valley? Tell us the story.
Well, actually, I'm one of those people who just drove through the valley for many years, not really knowing what it was, although I had met someone who said she really liked the ambiance of the valley. I didn't know what she was talking about at the time. And yet I was living in Marin since 1970, so it was about 20 years at that point, and my rent kept getting higher and higher. And so I started looking for some place that wasn't so expensive, and actually found that there was a trailer court in Marin, in Forest Knolls, in the valley. And I think it was around, I'm sure it was Mother's Day. And a friend of mine said, well, why don't we just look at it? Because, of course, trailers don't have a very good reputation. I was aware of that, and I was concerned as a single person what I would find. So we went behind what was a little bar and a garage.
That's right, yeah.
And there was the Forest Knolls trailer court.
Yeah.
It was pretty funky, which it still is, but it had this very small 2-room trailer, good condition, and and a lot of windows. And the sun came in. There wasn't a lot of. It was on the sunny side of Forest Knolls. And I thought, well, I have a lot of plants. I need some space to garden. And there was just enough space to garden and then windows, and I thought, fine. And the person was an artist who was living there, and she said she'd never saved so much money in her life in Marin till she moved there, and I thought that sounded good. And so we worked it out, and I moved in there in 1992. So I've been there now about 32 years.
You're still there?
I'm still there. It's the longest I've ever lived anywhere.
Since 92?
Yeah, I mean, I've moved here to California in 1970 and had lived in Fairfax first. I lived in Inverness for a while, in Point Reyes, and then finally in San Anselmo, and now I ended up in Forest Knolls for the longest time.
And you live by yourself?
I live by myself, yes. My daughter was with me when we moved here, and of course...
She moved on.
She sure did. She lives in Petaluma now.
What do you do?
Well, I'm retired now.
And before that, what would...
Well, when I moved here, in Chicago, I was born in Chicago, I was a high school English teacher. And when I moved here, I had decided I did not want to do that anymore. And in Fairfax at the time was a storefront library. It was on Center, right in the town, and I used to go there all the time. I don't know if you knew Emily, what was her last name now? Anyway, she had been there for years, and all the kids grew up with her. And one day I just asked if she needed a volunteer. And she said to go to the Civic Center and see Betty Times and sign up. She needed a substitute. So I started working in the libraries. And when it moved to the larger building, I moved with it. And
what was your job? at the
I was
library?
a reference librarian.
Oh.
I had had some graduate courses in library science, and at the time, the libraries were just sort of anyone who knew how to read. I won't say knew how to read, but anyone who was interested in libraries and working in libraries. Degrees weren't important at the time in Marin. It has grown up quite a bit since then, and almost every one of the cities has a dedicated library. And and anyway, I started out in Fairfax, and then I went to the College of Marin for a while, and then the last maybe 15, 20 years, I worked in Sausalito Library. And so I'm a reference librarian.
Oh,
But I'm
darned.
retired right before the pandemic. When that started, that's when they closed down the libraries, and I retired at that point.
Isn't that interesting, Paul? A librarian.
You're going to have to show
Yeah.
our
Well, we're doing.
library.
Yeah.
Oh, I've
She-
been in
she-
there. I've been in
Oh,
there.
you've been in there.
Yes, when I moved here, I was so glad there was a library around. I mean, I had been in most of the libraries, but I hadn't been in that one, and there it was where I could request any book I wanted, of course, in the system.
You're talking about the library that was at the top of the hill?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's yes, in Lagunitas.
In
Yes,
the Lagunitas School.
Yes.
Right at the top.
yes. I didn't work there, but I certainly used it. I was very sad when they started closing those down. There was one in Woodacre, and one in Lagunitas, small storefronts. And
Yeah, I'll just interject. I love libraries, and I have my own story of how I discovered books when I was a child. But
Yes.
here, some of those things that you never forget. And they had a library in Forest Knolls, a small one. They had a small one in Woodacre. This was many, many years ago. Those closed, and they ended up. They rented in Lagunitas the upper space and had a wonderful small library there that Grandpa and Paul went to every afternoon. Every afternoon. Paul on one side with his book, Paul on the other side with his book. They're hour together usually, and then they walk up the hill home. And
Yes.
I loved the fact that the library was there, but I knew that people from Woodacre, Forest, and San Geronimo, they don't go to that library. They would go to the Fairfax Library, which is a nice library. Oh, I love the library there. And so I decided that library should come here at the top of the hill.
I see.
So Marin Community Foundation they were not in the Marin at the time. They were in San Francisco, and I called them, and I talked to someone at the county, library staff. I'd forget the lady's name, and I told them I would like to see that library moved here,
Yes.
so it was more centrally located. And they gave X dollars to make that happen. So we had this wonderful library
Yeah.
here, right at the top of the hill. And
The school used it?
it was, and then the county librarian and others, things were financially bad, I guess, and they began to take surveys of how many people were using the libraries. That was the beginning of the death of this library. There were not enough people. So I got a grant, $10,000 grant.
Oh, did you?
And some people formed a little committee to use that grant to get people to come to this library, the Valley people to come to this library and support it. And I invited myself to their meeting. They didn't want me to come. Gene Berensmeier. They didn't want. I got it right away. I said, okay, fine. I backed off. I said, have a great meeting. And I gave them their 10,000. And you know what they did? They built a couple of benches to put in the front. They
Oh.
bought these big rounds that they made as steps from the library down to the school, which were useless.
Oh.
And they wasted $10,000. They needed to get on. People were looking at computers. If they had a few computers there,
Yeah, they did.
they would have. It would have turned.
Yeah.
But it died. It died, and the county canceled it. It was the end of our library.
Well,
I
I'll tell you
was
something else. The librarian there was not into the community and to
No,
promoting
you're
the
right.
library.
You're right. I know that. You're, and that's essential.
It is
That
essential.
well, you know that, and I was so disappointed. The wonderful library that we had in Lagunitas, I felt responsible. I knew it was in the wrong place. I loved it at the bottom of the hill, but I knew it was in the wrong place, and so I wanted to be helpful. And you know how you do.
Yes.
And I screwed it up. In
Yeah.
my one sense, it didn't succeed. And I'm going, I wonder if it had stayed there, but no, it wouldn't have lasted there either. No, not enough people.
There are people that don't know what libraries have to offer.
No, they don't.
They just don't know,
No,
and it's
no.
not publicized.
No.
You know, you grow up with it. I grew up, certainly. My father used to take me all the time. But they don't know how to come there with questions, with problems, with why I want to find this out, or where would I go. They just come in and look around often, and then they leave, you know. But I think there is much more now I would say with social media and things of that sort, of outreach to all groups and different groups, and getting people in the library with their shows, their events that happen. But that took a long time coming, and people just have no idea. In fact, I'd be asked questions, and they would say something like, well, I didn't know I could ask you a question like, that you would have the answer. But that's what we were there for. I tried to explain. That's why I'm here. That's what I get paid for, to answer your questions, to come to your help. It's a service industry, absolutely, nothing else. And now, because of the pandemic, I'll tell you, the big difference is people have learned how to request books and not go into the library. They just request them, they pick them up, they take them home, and they don't look around at the art shows or the this or the that or the newspapers. And like everything else, we got used to staying home and ordering our food and watching TV and stuff like that. Well, the libraries haven't really picked up the same patrons either this time around. I hope they do, though. I think they will, but
The thing, did you just say that the people going to libraries has declined? Is that what you're?
the people
Yeah.
that walk in and browse,
Yeah.
or talk, children's stuff, or they have teenage sections now, just for teenagers and kids, and I think that I know this only by looking at the request shelves.
Oh,
There used to be, maybe 2 or 3 shelves on a book
yeah.
shelf for requests. The request shelves have moved, filled all that up, and then some that used to be just library books. They get a lot of requests. And it's so easy. You just do it on the internet, and then they tell you when the book is there, and you just go pick it up, and you check it out by yourself. That, I think, was a mistake myself, to have machines that you check out books yourself. Because it used to be when people came up to you to check out their books, you'd get to know everything about them. What books they read, what they like, what you can tell
Yeah, there
them
was a
that's on the
connection.
shelf.
Okay.
And you could say, and in fact, when I started in this storefront with Emily, she would call people when new mysteries came in. She had a list of mystery readers and their phone numbers, and she would just call them one after another and tell them, this
Such
one will
and
have
so
it
was
for that.
in.
Yeah. I mean, it was that close a situation, and because we check out books ourselves and throw them into the bin outside the library, there's not that connection so much with libraries, and then just request books we want. It's in my mind, I can see that distance that has happened.
Well, that's a wonderful story to have a librarian who knows the ins and outs of all of that. I don't know why, but for several years, people would drop books off here. Sometimes they were about salmon or wildlife that we deal with, but other times they were just good books, and they'd leave them in a bag or a box, and we collected them for a long time. And when the pandemic came on, we came down here, everything was closed down, schools were closed down, our program was closed down, so Paul and I, we talked about an opportunity here to take a look at all these books that were everywhere, underneath here and there and stacked and, on the shelves, just everywhere. And we started, I called a few people, and the book bunch emerged. And we meet 10 to 12 every Wednesday, and we have now for a year, and we've created, and I want to take you over to take a peek. We've created what we are calling, and we'll have a grand opening, the Community Library. Wilderness Way Community Library. I'll take you over there. We have maybe 1,500 books now. Which I think is quite a few, and we've had a few people drop by certain books that they wanted moving out of the valley.
Oh yes,
and they're
amazing number of books come to the library that way.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I was surprised. I'd find a box here or a bag sometimes, and so we started collecting them. And when we started the book bunch, Paul got some bookshelves. People that were leaving the valley, I got a hold of them. Are you getting rid of any bookshelves? We got a wall full of bookshelves, and now we're meeting again. We continue to meet, and we're getting close to having a grand opening. We're getting close, and so I think we're finished here, Paul. I want to. Can we take a peek at that? I'd love to show you what we've got. And